All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Monday, May 23rd, 2016. And this is Before the First Cup with Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Monday, everyone. It is a sunny 70 degrees, beautiful late spring day here in upstate New York. We managed to get all of the vegetables planted this weekend, so I'm pretty excited because all my plants now are getting perky in the morning sunshine right now. So where do we leave off yesterday or Friday? We titled the show Brain, Glyphosate, Bill Gates, Department of Energy, Synthetic Biology, and the microbiome. And I think that about sums up the last 2 weeks of shows. Might want to throw a little Google in there and maybe, I don't know. I don't even remember what the hell we talked about. There are probably all kinds of body parts. Poop transplants, gut bacteria. But pretty much, I think we've established, at least to beyond a shadow of a doubt in my own mind. And, you know, like I always say, don't listen to what I tell you. I give you guys the links. Go research it. Don't believe it because I say it. But at least go look at some of the studies that they've done, and you'll find that they're pretty compelling, and you'll probably come to around the same conclusions that I have, that there is definitely a very, very strong connection between gut bacteria and at least our overall physical health. But we did many stories over the last 2 weeks that also looked at the relationship between mental health and disease with decimation of the gut bacteria. There was another story that we did not get to, and maybe we will. I still have all of these tabs open up from the last 2 weeks, but we did talk about on Friday how they've now discovered that antibiotics and anything with a good antibiotic capabilities such as glyphosate, right? That's where we tied Monsanto into all this, causes new brain cells to stop growing in the section of the brain that's responsible for memory. How interesting is that they're feeding us all of this genetically modified food, that the majority of which is saturated with glyphosate, which is a potent antibiotic. And it actually causes not just decimation of gut bacteria that causes the cascaded diseases, that causes the leaky gut syndrome and autoimmune and all this other crazy stuff, but it also literally stops, potentially, because it is an antibiotic, stops the growth of new brain cells in your brain. So we ended the show, though. This is, I mean, even scarier than all this stuff we've been talking about is this new, completely off the rails, mad science. We first looked at it with DARPA, and I had mentioned that DARPA had an RFP out there looking for somebody to give them a price on how to create a synthetic immune system inside the human body. And we know that these tech billionaires have been on this quest to live forever. Longevity projects, they all have one. Precision medicine is all a part of this. You know, being able to treat you at a DNA level, do personalized medicine for you and little Johnny. We'll make sure that we run your genome sequence when you're born, put you in a database, let IBM Watson scan over it. We're going to be talking about some IBM here that's just beyond. You thought Google's gotten into the game with creepy, invasive, trying to find out how to control the human body type stuff? Well, I guess IBM's in on it too. We also found out Microsoft, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, is in the middle of a lot of this other stuff. You know, this whole living therapeutics, being able to create the synthetic biome, the synthetic quote-unquote gut bacteria that can go in, search and destroy and reprogram you. Yes, that had all kinds of cash from Bill and Melinda Gates. as well as, lots of the other scary things that we've looked at along the way. They seem to pop up like a little whack-a-mole. But I lost my train of thought. Oh, just this new synthetic immune system thing. So we've read about that in the past from DARPA. DARPA had an RFP out there looking for a way to use programmable cells that they can make do anything they want. I mean, it's amazing now. Biology has become a tinker toy. And they can program cells just as easily as they can program an application. And once they've launched them into the body, they can make them do anything they want to do. So this new thing is this new immune system. Well, story came out of New York Times, and this is where we ended the show on Friday. They started talking about this. They titled it Protection Without a Vaccine. They're like, oh, look how great this is. I told you back in 2006 when I took that FEMA class that was paid for with George Bush emergency dollars, trying to make sure that all the communities were prepared for a terrorist attack. I mean, it was putting fear into the hearts of everyone in middle America. So let's make sure we train those people. Let's show them. And so we did a lot of stuff on pandemics. We did a lot of stuff on how to treat large amounts of people if there were a pandemic in your local community. We had a whole plan on how everybody was going to come to the high school to get their medication. We had a drive-through set up. If it was an injection, then we had the place where all the lines would start queuing up and how we'd take care of that. It was all in the case of an emergency, and they trained. We did 8 weeks of training as citizens that would help in an emergency. And here I thought I was being all, smart. I had a new baby. I was all paranoid. Like, what if the shit hit it? I wanted to know how to protect myself. Little did I know that, peel back the onion 10 years later, and there's so much ugliness and rotten manipulation that's going on in the background. This whole mentality of being afraid, and I'm telling you, I am still very afraid that when they pull it, and I mean, we see there's all little pieces crumbling all over. But eventually, there's going to be one thing that causes all the lemmings to run the other way, Johnny. And I have a big feeling it is going to be some sort of quote-unquote pandemic. I mean, we've seen it. We've talked about it here many times. Measles, Ebola, Zika. And before that, we had bird flu, and we had swine flu, and we had all the other crap. We've covered how Project BioShield back enacted in the days of Bush Jr. allowed them to stockpile experimental vaccines from Big Pharma that didn't require any type of FDA approval or human testing in the case of an emergency. We also found out that when they declare a state of emergency in this country, they can open the doors up to stuff from foreign lands. So back when we had the bird flu, and they had squalene in those vaccines in Europe, we didn't have them here. There was no approval process. Now remember, they're trying to get rid of the FDA here. Not that they really did a lot to keep us safe. We found out it cost a whole butt ton of money to be able to get your product approved through the FDA. But with that 21st Century CARES Act, and I don't know if that's moved any further in the Congress, but it was put to a vote last year. I don't know if it made it through the House or not. We'd have to look, but look up 21st Century CARES Act, CURES, C-U-R-E-S. I always call it CARES, but it's CURES Act. What they're saying in that is that we we the people, we FDA, the FDA that quote unquote cares about the people, we Congress who are supposed to be ruling for the people are holding back life-saving technologies right now because of all of this danged research to make sure stuff is safe. Safe, schmafe. Let's get it out there in the hands of the people. This brand new Mad Science Gone Man, because it's gonna save some lives. And you know what? If it does save some lives, then we'll do like the tech companies do. We'll write a case study. We'll tell you about Johnny's disease and how Johnny was miraculously cured. And when we get enough of those, people are going to believe in it and step right up and be the next guinea pig to get in line to become a part of this new 21st century human they're trying to create. You're like, 21st century human? They're not trying to create a 21st century human, Jewel. Well, all right, so let's get back to this New York Times story, because if I have seen anything that has kind of grabbed me by that little tiny area between my two nostrils with a sharp, pointy thing, it's this story. They titled it Protection Without a Vaccine. I even posted this on my personal Facebook page that is only for friends and family who I do not expose to any of this scariness, because, you know, they already know I think that, so I don't give them any more reason to point to me and tell me to put my tinfoil hat on. But this was in the New York Times, so I had to post this as a kind of to all of my pro-vaccine friends and family. Last month, a team of researchers, and basically it was a, hey, look, I'm all for vaccines too. Why don't you step up? How awesome is this? And nobody commented, by the way. Last month, a team of scientists announced what could prove to be an enormous step forward in the fight against HIV. Of course, it's always about HIV. We talked about HIV. The Chinese are editing embryos in the lab, though, you know, none of them are allowed to come to term. Also in the UK, and I thought I saw Sweden, and there might have been one or two other countries where they have dubbed it to be ethical. The Chinese are trying to edit out, they were infecting and then trying to edit out HIV so they could never be infected with HIV. And I don't know, you know, go back to the whole hoax thing. I still think it was created somewhere in a jungle in one of those secret labs in Africa. But regardless, HIV seems to be a hot new thing to be messing around with in the lab again. And so they prove an enormous step forward in the fight against HIV. Scientists at Scripps Research Institute said that they had developed an artificial antibody. Now, right, we had talked about DARPA with their synthetic immune system. They had an RFP out there wanting people to create one and then sell it to them. Well, here we go. Scripps Research Institute has developed an artificial antibody that once in the blood grabbed a hold of the HIV virus and inactivated it. This molecule can eliminate HIV from infected monkeys and protect them from future infections. Now, let's flashback 2006, when I was taking that FEMA class all about pandemics. And one of the things that they told us then is that they had started working on a universal flu vaccine. Because how horrible was it that every single year we did all this guessing as to what next year's flu was going to be, and we grew it in eggs, and it took all this time. And then when flu season came around, whoops, we picked the wrong flu strain. Damn it, now this flu vaccine that we spent all these bazillions of dollars doing for this next year isn't going to work as well as it should. But hey, get your vaccine anyway. There might be some protection. So since that was so difficult, the next thing they started doing was some of this GMO tobacco where they were soaking the tobacco and some sort of enzymes. I don't remember exactly how it worked, but they were doing it down at Texas A&M and up in Kentucky with one of the big tobacco growers. I don't know. I always mix them up, Philip Morris or the other guy, but the two big names in tobacco, they're both involved in this. And there was that Metagayco, I think. And not only were they messing around with the Blue Angel program and looked that up, there was a DARPA program that was all about this universal flu vaccine. But then Ebola. That was when they first started messing with the tobacco plants, genetically modified tobacco plants, antibodies, and creating vaccines in the tobacco plants for Ebola. So now let's fast forward. So we're talking, that was 10 years ago. Then, I don't know, Project BioShield, so allowing experimental drugs into the national stockpile. Boop. And now move forward, Ebola and all this other stuff. They started working on it way back in the swine flu days. That was the Blue Angel program, was all about that. So, we're talking at least 10 years that I am aware of, that they've been talking about this universal search and destroy in the body, because our immune system, apparently, again, the foibles of biology, our immune system that evolved over millions of years is insufficient, I guess, because God forbid every once in a while we catch a cold. And hey, you can die from the flu. Damn you. And they want to be immortal. Remember, this is all about longevity. They want to live. They want to be able to repair the body before it ever gets broken. We have CEOs of their own biotech company doing gene therapy on themselves, messing around with their own telomeres, making themselves their own guinea pig. We have that Russian scientist. Maybe we'll listen to him to break this up after I read the story. We have that Russian scientist who injected himself with like 4.5 million year-old bacteria because he thinks it's going to make him live forever. I mean, this is a race that has been going on for hundreds, if not thousands of years, is the search for the Holy Grail. That's what it was all about. This endless search that I think it's hubris. You know what? You're worried about an object. You're worried about reaching, grasping for something that should not be in your hands because you are mere mortal. Anybody who's been a student of literature, got an English degree, it took me 4.5 years of intense pain and suffering and hundreds of papers written about all the classics. And I got to tell you, probably Milton. I took an entire class in Milton, and this book was probably 2,000 pages, leather-bound Milton book, and we did all of Milton's descent, falling to hell stories. Oh, my God. And whether or not man has free will, there's a lot to be said. Milton was a blind man who was dying. And we were taught, he dictated that amazing piece of work to his daughter, who transcribed it on his deathbed. Man is not meant to be God. It's, if you go back to any of the biblical texts, and you have Satan who was cast out. Maybe Satan was trying to be God. Maybe Satan was genetically modifying creatures to live forever. And he screwed up. I'm telling you guys, this is like some of the most evil shit that we've ever seen in the history of man. So let me read this anyway before I get too far off the mark. So they're working on now trying to create something that's going to stop when it finds infection in the blood and reverse it. Now, our immune systems do that. HIV is one, it's a virus, right? It's very difficult. HIV is one of those DNA viruses. I don't know, is this one a DNA virus? I know a lot of the other ones are like herpes and that. The herpes simplex, chickenpox. Those are those DNA viruses. They're always there. And it takes like stress or whatever to kick them into gear. We also have other things. I mean, there's like malaria and the flu and whatever. So, all right, let's talk about this. So, they've said now at the Scripps Institute that they have created an artificial antibody that once in the blood grabs a hold of the HIV virus and inactivates it. And, insert virus here, whatever it is. And this molecule can eliminate HIV from infected monkeys and protect them from future infections. So something that the Chinese have been trying to do with embryos to make them forever immune to HIV, apparently they've done at the Scripps Institute using this molecule. But this treatment is not a vaccine in the ordinary sense, they say. By delivering. Now, we talked about that secret meeting in Harvard, creating the synthetic human genome. What the ethics of that are, creating an entire DNA sequence for a human out of nothing that came from a parent, out of creating a DNA sequence for a human that came out of raw materials that we pushed buttons with a program and created some sort of CRISPRed DNA that then we reproduce in a petri dish and grow a synthetic human, right? We talked about that last week. Well, now what they're talking about is by delivering synthetic genes, yes, ding, synthetic genes, into the muscles of the monkeys, the scientists are essentially re-engineering the animal. Let's read that again. They are essentially re-engineering the animal, yes, with synthetic genes, to resist the disease. Now, in this case, in their experiments, it happened to be HIV. Researchers are now testing this novel approach, not just against HIV, but what? Oh, let's open up the closet and go into the back, because look, pull out good old Ebola. Yep, Ebola. Oh, wait, Bill Melinda Gates. Let's pull out good old malaria. Yep, malaria. Oh, wait, let's go back to Project BioShield 2006. Yes, let's go and pull out influenza. Pick a type of influenza. There's lots of them. Yep, dink. And here's one I haven't run across yet, but it doesn't mean they give your baby right out of the womb one of these shots, hepatitis. Yep. They want to also use the synthetic gene that re-engineers your body to keep you safe from hepatitis. The sky is the limit, says Michael Farzan, an immunologist at the Scripps Institute and lead author of this new study. Dr. Farzan and other scientists are increasingly hopeful that this technique may be able to provide long-term protection against diseases for which vaccines have failed. Now, they can show us all these cases. The newest one is whooping cough. MMR. Oh, we had measles outbreak at, I think it was Harvard. It was one of the big Ivy League schools. Measles or mumps. Maybe it was mumps. I think it was mumps. And we had whooping cough at the end of last year. It was all over the upper Pacific Northwest. And we had measles. Damn it, Johnny. It wasn't that we had unvaccinated children at Disney World. It was that, oh, your measles vaccine must have been faulty, Johnny. I mean, we've been pointing out the lie with some of this current vaccine technology for quite a while now. And it seems to me that even though we wanted them to admit the fact that the chemicals they're putting in there are dangerous, they're putting animal serums and recombinant proteins in there now and synthetic stuff. We looked at that Gardasil vaccine, those virus-like particles, and putting nano payloads into these synthetic virus-like particles that work just like genetic engineering does on plants. Yeah. Okay, we've looked at some really crazy stuff. But now they're making these fully synthetic to be able to go in and edit your DNA or the DNA of your children. All right, let's read a little bit more here. I lost my spot. Oh, yes. So Dr. Farzan and the other scientists are increasingly hopeful that this technique may be able to provide long-term protection against disease for which, ding, vaccines have failed. So careful what you ask for. All you anti-vaxxers out there, we're going to play flip the role reversal. You think they're bad? Yeah, they're bad. Guess what? They didn't work. But hey, we have new and improved vaccines coming that everybody will have to take because it'll protect you against everything. There will be no more disease. And if you don't take these, you're going to be a burden to our socialized healthcare system that is about ready to be a part of everybody's lives as we have a full collapse and we all have to go on universal basic incomes. Yeah. There will be no more paid health insurance that has a private insurer that, I don't know. I mean, insurance companies don't cover half your shit anyway, and they're not going to cover anything experimental. So we got to make sure we get everybody in the system. We get everybody's records electronicized. We get everybody buying into this precision medicine. Give me a DNA swab, Johnny. Also, give me your microbiome because we just launched this whole nationwide microbiome project to go along with the Brain Project and the Antibacterial Resistant Project. Holy shit, we care so much about you. And now the Zika Project, too. Looks like they took it down from 1.9 to 1.1 billion for Zika, they're looking. So, yeah, we got, all these programs to care about you, Jenny. So don't worry about it. But the way we're going to keep you safe is we have this newfangled technology that's all part of the system. We can bag and tag and track you. And when you get sick, hey, there's a shortage of doctors, too. So when you get sick, you don't even need robot doctors now. We got these little things, whether they be synthetic bacteria in your gut or little nanobodies in your blood with a Google logo on them. Or now, apparently, some sort of synthetic genes injected into your muscle from the Scripps Institute inside your body. Pick one. You can't be a burden on the system, but we're going to be able to fix you. And it's not even going to be painful because a vaccine isn't a vaccine anymore. I mean, this is just twisted. And they're going to want people to stand up and get a shot. Or they're just going to start doing it like they did with all the GMO, put it in the food since the 1980s and not say anything to anyone. I mean, that Gardasil vaccine, if parents knew that they were giving their 10-year-old daughters and sons now, quote-unquote virus-like particles, which are synthetic virus shells, that then they load with nanoparticles to inject into your child, that's doing who the hell knows what. Nobody would put their baby, well, maybe not nobody, but I know at least I would put my baby in harm's way that way. How could you do that? Absolute 100% guinea pig testing for free. Remember, get rid of that line item R&D budget for Big Pharma. They just got a huge butt patent, slippery hands, wet willy of a smile profit. They don't need to pay for R&D and then need to prove to the FDA that it's safe if we have Congress pass that 21st Century Cures Act. Because now it won't need to be approved because, hey, all that approval is allowing people to die, and there are all these great mad science gone mad projects out there that might be able to save a life. The sky is the limit, says Michael Farzan, an an immunologist at Scripps and the lead author of the new study, Dr. Farzan and other scientists are increasingly hopeful that this technique may be able to provide long-term protection against diseases for which vaccines have failed. The first human trial based on this strategy, called immunoprophylaxis by gene transfer, or IGT for short, is now underway. So this is the first human trial, is already underway, and I'm sure it's the desperate and the dying. And several new ones are now planned. This could revolutionize the way we immunize against public health threats in the future, says Dr. Gary J. Nabel, the chief scientific officer of who? Oh, Sanofi. Sanofi is the French company. I saw that there were some kickback charges that I don't know if they ever proved them or not. But they're that French company that just got the approval for the dengue vaccine, that mass vaccination program for the Brazilian women, and now I don't know who ended up running out there with the first Zika vaccine, if that's even come out yet, but I know Sanofi was one of the companies that already had a good head start on Zika too. And if I'm not mistaken, there might have even been Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation cash with that company's son. Hold on, let's look really quick if Bill and Melinda Sanofi. I know they had Gates Foundation. They had money in one of the vaccine companies in India, but that was not Sanofi. Sanofi's out of France. Gates Foundation. If I could spell. I'm bad at spelling on Monday morning. Oh, Sanofi Pasteur announces vaccine discovery collaboration with who? Oh, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. I knew it. Like just about any of these companies, man, just about any of these companies, plug them in and plug in either DARPA or Gates Foundation at the end, and you will get a story. They're everywhere, guys. It has been beyond infiltrated. They are everywhere. They are involved. This is not for you and me. Bill Gates in his TED Talk about needing to bring the carbon quotient down to zero. Now, as we have this big global COP21 that happened in France, by the way, in France as well, about, climate change, and oh my God, we need to bring the carbon quotient down. Well, Billy Gates has been talking about that for a while, and one of the things he said in that TED Talk was through vaccines, if you remember. He also, in one of those let mosquitoes go, little flying syringes, genetically modified, and they also had money in that Oxitec for research. Guys, this is a very ugly, scary picture that is being painted. So, Bill and Melinda Gates apparently definitely have their eye on this ball. So this could revolutionize the way we immunize against public health threats in the future, says Dr. Gary J. Nabel, a chief scientific officer of Sanofi, a pharmaceutical company that produces a wide range of vaccines. Whether IGT, the immunoprophylaxis by gene transfer, will succeed is still an open question. Researchers still need to gauge its safety and effectiveness in humans. Oh, the humanity. And the prospect of genetically engineering people to resist infectious diseases may raise some concern among patients. Do you think? Let's read that again. The prospect of genetically engineering people to resist infectious diseases may raise concern among patients. This is in the New York Times, people. So all those tinfoil hat wearing friends of yours who've been talking about genetically modifying your children with vaccines for the longest time, guys, it is not fantasy. They are literally, I'm telling you, they've been talking about this at least for 10 years that I am personally aware of. And who knows, we found out they've been slipping us GMO foods into the food supply since the 80s. I really wanted to get to some of those genetically modified bananas and this banana vaccine and stuff, how they can put it in your food. I mean, we've talked about that. We did 2 or 3 shows on that a while back. But I want to tie that into the gut bacteria. Remember, Bill and Melinda Gates are also involved in that microbiome study, the living therapeutics with the scientists out of MIT, and how that can totally not only control your gut and your immune system and organs and all kinds of disease, but also your brain and your mood. And guys, this is a full takeover of biology, 100%. And a usurpation, because they're injecting you with synthetic genes that are going to then incorporate themselves into the biological entity. And wait, it goes on. Let's read more out of New York Times about how this technology works here. It says the reality is we are touching a third rails. So it's going to take some explanation, says Dr. David Baltimore, a Nobel Prize recipient and virologist at Caltech, who is testing this new IgT technology against a number of diseases. Conventional vaccines prompt the immune system to learn how to make antibodies by introducing it to weak or dead pathogens or even just their molecular fragments. Our immune cells produce a wide range of antibodies, and some of which can fight these infections. In some cases, these antibodies provide very strong defenses. Vaccinations against things such as smallpox and measles can lead to almost complete protection. But against other diseases, conventional vaccines often fail to produce effective antibodies. HIV, for example, yeah. And so it comes in many different strains that a vaccine can protect against, but then not work against the others. So IgT is altogether different from a traditional vaccine. It is instead a form of gene therapy. So step right up, Johnny. You know what? You don't need to get your 64 vaccines to go to school now. You just need to get your gene therapy. And let's make sure, as we're learning all about this stuff, let's make sure if your mom and dad pay for it, we can get you the brain augmentation. So you could be a little bit smarter and get straight A's, Johnny, and go into the rocket program to go to Mars. I don't know. You know. And oh, your auntie paid for wings. So we'll add the wing genes to your gene therapy, Johnny, that you get at 5 or whatever. You know, how insane is this, people? And they're trying to mainline this by putting it in the New York Times to get everybody all excited that we're going to have this universal, not just flu vaccine like they were talking about 10 years ago. Now let's put on Frankenstein with steroids. This is going to be a full out and out live gene transfer of synthetic genes that go in and change your physical genetic makeup forever. It is instead a form of gene therapy, and scientists isolate the genes that produce powerful antibodies against certain diseases, and then they synthesize artificial versions. These genes are then placed into viruses, just like how we genetically modify food, and then they inject these viruses into human tissue, which is usually muscle. So don't worry about it. You can do it right in your arm, Johnny. And it's not going to hurt because we're also working on needleless injections. And then these viruses that we've put synthetic artificial versions of antibodies into that are then injected into your arm, Johnny, invade your cells with their DNA payloads, their synthetic DNA payloads. And the synthetic genes are then incorporated into your own DNA. And if all works well, the story says, these new genes will instruct your cells to begin manufacturing powerful antibodies against these new diseases that we've done gene therapy for. How awesome is that? Damn, Genie. Did you see the Sunday New York Times? They're talking about being able to cure me of every disease. How do I get that? Let's call the doctor. Let's see if we can step right up and get in the front of the line. I want to be protected from all of these diseases. Can you even believe this? And I think I'm going to read this uninterrupted by myself so you could hear this again. All right, let me find it. Where to go? Scientists isolate the genes that produce powerful antibodies against certain diseases and then synthesize artificial versions of those powerful antibodies. The genes are then placed into viruses and then injected into human tissue, which is usually muscle. These viruses then invade human cells with their DNA payloads, and the synthetic gene is incorporated into the recipient's own DNA. And if all goes well, these new genes instruct the cells to begin manufacturing powerful antibodies. Hey! So, we're going to have genetically modified humans all in the name of keeping you safe from all these scary diseases that live in the backs of your closets and under your beds that they've been priming the pump for the last 10 or 15 years. This is why I think that our future holds a big, scary, genetically modified pandemic like they've been splicing and dicing. You know, the 1918 flu. They're like, oh, let's see if we can make it more virulent. Oh, what? Bird flu? Yeah, not one, but two. Two killer strains that can wipe out 3/4 of the population now published. That's why I think that the ultimate evil is going to be to force us to have to step up and get something like this. Oh my God, if you don't, this is your best chance. It's in the strategic stockpile as part of Project BioShield. I could see that coming. Guys, don't put anything, even no matter how horrific that could be, do not put anything past them. And when you have every one of these big vaccine companies merging with genetic modification, when you Monsanto, back 2 years ago, we were already looking, going, how weird that Monsanto's way that they genetically modify plants is exactly how now they're genetically modifying tobacco and making vaccines. Remember that? We looked at RNAi and switch flipping on and off. How weird it was that they were using all the same technologies, and all of a sudden we're reading a story in the New York Times about a vaccine that's going to protect you against anything they want that literally genetically modifies human DNA. Whoops. There was no connection there. Of course there was. Brave New World coming very soon. So anyway, the idea for this genetic therapy emerged during the fight against HIV, and in a very few people, it turns out, some antibodies against HIV turn out to be extremely potent. So-called broadly neutralizing antibodies can latch on to many different strains of the virus and keep them from infecting new cells. So Dr. Philip R. Johnson, Chief Scientific Officer of the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and a virologist at the University of Pennsylvania, had an idea. Why not try giving broadly neutralizing antibodies to everybody? Oh, all right. Well, good idea there, Dr. Johnson. At the time, Dr. Johnson and other researchers were also experimenting with gene therapy for disorders like hemophilia. Researchers had figured out how to load genes into viruses and then persuade them to invade cells. But remember, we talked about genetically modifying food. It's how they've been doing it for years. They put the payload into the virus like a Trojan horse because viruses, that's what they do. They scan a cell and find any little vulnerability to be able to invade the crack, get inside, and then replicate. So viruses are the perfect vehicle for poison into any type of biological cell. So anyway, researchers figured out how to load genes into viruses and then persuade them to invade cells. And it occurred to Dr. Johnson that he might be able to use this strategy to introduce the gene for a powerful antibody into a patient's cell. After the cells began producing antibodies, the patient, in effect, would be quote-unquote vaccinated against a disease. The idea represented a radical new direction for gene therapy, and until then, researchers had focused on curing disease and genetic disorders by providing working versions of defective genes. So they had originally, right, this is what we were talking about with CRISPR, let's zip, snip, snip, and put the new genes in, or put the replacement genes in, like in the cow in China, that they cut out the milk genes, the milk producing genes, and they put human milk producing genes in there. Bloop, bloop. That's how they're doing it up until this point. But hey, why not get crazier than that? But on the other hand, this genetic therapy would also protect healthy people from infectious diseases, which is, you know what, guys, I've been warning you against this prophylaxis. That is before you get sick, giving you something to keep you quote unquote safe. That some of this crazy shit like Ebola and all these other mad science gone mad vaccines that they've been developing over the last few years was at some point going to become required for us. Well, it's not even going to have to be required for us anymore because they can just give us this IgT genetic therapy that'll make certain that our new synthetic immune system that integrates itself into our DNA will be able to recognize those. So you'll be all set, Johnny. You won't have to worry about any of those Ebola fruit bats in your backyard. Well, there was no guarantee that this would succeed. And for one thing, the best virus that Dr. Johnson had for delivering genes worked only to invade muscle cells, which normally would never make any antibodies. So in 2009, see, they have been working on this for a long time, Dr. Johnson and his colleagues announced that the approach worked after all. And that's after all that infusion funding from the federal government, by the way. 2006 is when they first started talking about the universal vaccines. Here we are in 2009, and all of a sudden, hey, Dr. Johnson's experiment might have worked after all, after he got a nice big cash infusion. And in their experiment, they sought to protect monkeys from SIV, which is the primate's version of HIV, and to do so, they used viruses to deliver powerful genes to the monkey's muscles. The muscle cells produced SIV antibodies, and as Dr. Johnson and his colleagues had hoped, they then infected the monkeys with SIV, and the monkeys produced enough antibodies in their muscles to protect them from the SIV infections. The monkeys who didn't get the gene therapy, unfortunately died. Yeah, so wait, let's translate this now. Fast forward, translate to humans. Oh my God, there's a pandemic. Oh my God, there's something horrible out there. Well, guess what? We have a cure. We have a cure. Step right up and get your new gene therapy to protect you. Oh, you don't want to get your gene therapy, you anti-vaxxer? Oh, wah. Game over. It's over for you, Johnny. You don't want to play the game. I see it, people. They're not going to force anybody to do anything. They're just going to launch a plague that will be, quote unquote, cured by their gene therapy. And if you don't want to get 2.0'd, you don't want to get upgraded, then you will expire. Period. That's it. End of game. 1.0 humans will no longer exist. Dr. Johnson's study persuaded Dr. Farzan that IgT gene therapy has great promise. He says, and listen to this, Dr. Farzan says, quote, I started drinking the Kool-Aid, unquote. Well, I don't want to drink the Kool-Aid. The genetically modified red dye number 5 Kool-Aid, thank you. Doctors and his colleagues have been modifying HIV antibodies to develop more potent defenses against this virus now. So meanwhile, in 2011, Dr. Baltimore and his colleagues had then showed that antibodies delivered into cells with viruses could protect mice against injections of HIV, suggesting that the gene therapy could also protect people against HIV-contaminated needles. But most HIV occurs through sex, so Dr. Baltimore and his colleagues also infected female mice, another poor group of mousies. They infected them through their vaginal membranes. Like, poor little mousie, I didn't need to know that. And last year they reported that the technique also protected mice from infection through vaginal pathways. So they're also going to be giving this stuff at the OBGYN. This is sick. He says, we are going around the immune system rather than trying to stimulate the immune system. So no more worrying about crazy adjuvants or anything that were causing all kinds of issues. No, we'll just say, screw the immune system. Let's replace it all. He says, so what we're doing is fundamentally different from vaccination, although the end result is pretty similar. Gary Kettner, a microbiologist at Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, was intrigued and wondered if gene therapy could be marshaled against another major disease that eluded vaccines. Bill and Melinda Gates' favorite, malaria. And that Johns Hopkins school has shown up in so many of our stories. They are like a lizard's pit over there. Dr. Kettner, Dr. Baltimore, and their colleagues then found a potent antibody against malaria and used a virus to deliver the malaria gene for making it into mice. And last August, they reported that when malaria-laden mosquitoes hit the mice, 80% of the treated animals were protected. Guys, it is coming. Do. And then in 2013, and here we go, this is where we bring it back around. Dr. Wilson and his colleagues reported that the virus carrying antibody genes into the airway cells can enable mice and ferrets to fight off a wide range of flu strains. And since then, they have now tested this gene therapy against other viruses causing deadly outbreaks, oh my God, including Ebola. Dr. Wilson and his colleagues also teamed up with who? And I mentioned this the other day, MAP Biopharmaceuticals. And where have we talked about them before? Oh, yes. They were the company that developed the antibody against Ebola called ZMapp. And ZMapp was the one that used the genetically modified tobacco. It comes full circle, guys. The scientists have synthesized a gene for the ZMapp antibody and have delivered that gene into mouse muscles, and the experiments are only in their early stages, but oh my God, do we have encouraging data. Guys, it's coming, I'm telling you. And here, if to put salt in the wounds, IBM now says that it has designed a molecule that could fight off any human virus. Yes, IBM is now in the game as well. Part of the difficulty in tackling viruses, listen how they spin these stories, like Ebola and Zika, is that they are all so different and each one can regularly mutate. There's so many mutations and create different strains within the same viruses. So to address this, scientists, yes, DARPA asked for it, and now here they all come out of the cracks. Scientists have been busy looking at common characteristics of viruses that could be used to develop an all-powerful, all-seeing vaccine capable of fighting off any and all infections. And researchers at IBM say that they are getting close. This is exciting stuff. A macromolecule, a giant molecule made up of smaller units, has now been developed that could have the potential to block multiple types of viruses despite many variations involved. It's still in the early days, but it could result in drugs that aren't tricked by mutating viruses. Scientists from the tech giant IBM and the Institute of Bioengineering and Nanotechnology in Singapore ignored the RNA and DNA of the viruses they use for testing, because these would traditionally be the areas of target, as they give the viruses their characteristics, but they also tend to vary from virus to virus and mutation to mutation. So instead, now they're looking at glycoproteins, large molecules attached to the outside of all viruses, capable of latching on to cells in the body. And that is actually the process that makes us sick. So these macromolecules that are now being developed attract viruses and then hitches a ride on the glycoproteins and then neutralizes their acidity levels, making them less able to replicate in the process. Based on tests already carried out by the team on viruses such as Ebola and dengue, these macromolecules work as intended. It binds itself to the glycoproteins, disables the viral ability to infect healthy cells, and it was shown to be effective in stopping viruses from creating infection. Says it's almost daunting to create any type of therapeutic strategy for a virus, says James Hendrick of IBM Research. The glycoprotein is like honey, baby, like a honey trap. It's kind of sticky. And now we can go after cells faster than the virus can go after your immune cells. So put on a seatbelt, people, if you can even believe it. We only got about 15 seconds left. But we are talking about genetically modifying human DNA with synthetic DNA in the New York Times. And now IBM is in the immune system game. All right, guys, make sure you stick around. Ms. Lonnie Clark is live up next, and all kinds of great radio for Monday night with a new